Maria Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carried another tray of food to table 12. The heavy plates made her arms ache, but she kept walking with a smile on her face. Romano's Italian restaurant was busy tonight, and that meant more tips for her. She needed every dollar she could get. In the corner booth sat her 6-year-old son Tommy. His wheelchair was tucked neatly under the table, and his homework was spread out in front of him. A box of crayons sat beside his math worksheet. Tommy was always quiet when he came to the restaurant after school. He knew his mom was working hard, and he did not want to cause any trouble. Maria had been working at Romano's for almost 2 years now, ever since her husband Carlos died in that terrible accident at the construction site. One day he was there kissing her goodbye in the morning, and by evening the police were at her door with the worst news of her life. Carlos fell from a building and did not make it to the hospital alive. Everything changed after that day. Maria had to learn how to pay bills by herself. She had to learn how to take care of Tommy without help. She had to learn how to be strong when all she wanted to do was cry. The insurance money from Carlos helped for a while, but it was not enough. Tommy needed special care because of his legs, and that cost a lot of money. Tommy was born with weak muscles in his legs. The doctor said it was rare and there was no cure. He would need a wheelchair for his whole life. When he was a baby, Maria and Carlos did not know anything was wrong. Tommy smiled and laughed just like other babies. But when he should have started walking, he could not move his legs the right way. The wheelchair was expensive. The doctor visits were expensive. The special shoes Tommy needed were expensive. Sometimes Maria felt like everything in the world cost too much money and she did not have enough. But she never let Tommy see her worry. She always smiled when she looked at him. Working at Romano's was hard, but the customers usually tipped well. The restaurant was in a fancy part of the city where rich people came to eat. Maria served businessmen in expensive suits and women wearing jewelry that cost more than Maria made in a whole year. Sometimes she felt invisible to them. They would talk about their big houses and expensive cars while she poured their wine and cleaned their tables, but Maria was grateful for the job. Her boss, Mr. Romano, was kind to her. He let her bring Tommy to the restaurant after school. He said as long as Tommy was quiet and did his homework, he could stay. This saved Maria money because she did not have to pay someone to watch Tommy until she got home from work. Every day was the same routine. Maria would wake up early and make breakfast for Tommy. She would help him get dressed and ready for school. The special bus would come to pick him up. Then Maria would rush to work for the lunch shift. After lunch, she would have a break, and then Tommy would arrive at the restaurant. She would work the dinner shift while he did homework in the corner booth. The hardest part was seeing other families. Happy families who came to the restaurant together. Fathers who lifted their children and mothers who did not look tired all the time. Maria tried not to be jealous, but sometimes it hurt to see what she and Tommy could not have. Tommy never complained about anything. He never asked why his daddy was gone. He never asked why his legs did not work like other kids. He never asked why they lived in a small apartment instead of a big house. He was the sweetest boy Maria had ever known. Sometimes she thought he was too good for this world. The restaurant had a beautiful piano in the middle of the dining room. It was black and shiny and bigger than anything in Maria and Tommy's apartment. On Friday and Saturday nights, a man named Mr. Peterson came to play music for the customers. He wore a black suit, and his fingers moved like magic across the white and black keys. Maria noticed that Tommy always stopped doing his homework when Mr. Peterson played. Tommy would put down his pencil and watch the piano player with big eyes. His little hands would move on the table like he was playing music too. Maria thought it was cute, but she never really paid much attention to it. One night after Mr. Peterson finished playing, Maria saw Tommy wheel his chair closer to the piano. He sat there looking at it for a long time. His hands reached out, but he did not touch the keys. Maria was busy with customers, but she kept watching her son from the corner of her eye. When Maria finally had a moment to go over to Tommy, she asked him what he was thinking about. Tommy looked up at her with his big brown eyes and said he wondered what it would feel like to touch the piano keys. He said he dreamed about making music like Mr. Peterson. Maria felt her heart break a little bit. How could she explain that? Piano lessons cost money they did not have. That night when they got home to their small apartment, Maria tucked Tommy into his bed. He asked her if she thought his daddy could hear music in heaven. Maria told him yes, and that daddy would love to hear Tommy play music someday. Tommy smiled and closed his eyes. Maria sat in their tiny kitchen and looked at the bills on the table. Rent was due next week. Tommy needed new shoes. The electric bill was higher than usual. She added up the numbers in her head and felt that familiar worry in her stomach. There was never enough money for extras like music lessons or toys or the things other kids had, but as she watched Tommy sleep, Maria made herself a promise. Someday she would find a way to give her son everything he dreamed of. She did not know how or when, but she would make it happen. Tommy deserved to have his dreams come true. He had already been through too much sadness in his short life. Maria turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow would be another long day at the restaurant. Another day of serving rich people who had everything while she and Tommy had so little. But she would keep working and keep hoping. That was all she could do. Saturday night was always the busiest time at Romano's restaurant. The dining room was full of people dressed in fancy clothes. Women wore sparkling dresses and men had on expensive suits. The smell of garlic and fresh bread filled the air. Candles flickered on every table, making everything look warm and golden. Maria moved quickly between the tables, carrying plates and refilling wine glasses. Her feet hurt in her black shoes, but she kept smiling at every customer. Tonight the tips were good, and that made her happy. She could maybe buy Tommy some new books with the extra money. Tommy sat in his usual corner booth with his coloring book open in front of him. He had finished his math homework an hour ago. Now he was drawing a picture of a piano with his blue crayon. He colored very carefully, staying inside the lines. Tommy was always good at being quiet during dinner service. At table 6 sat a man who looked different from the other customers. He was not talking loudly or laughing with friends. He ate his food slowly and seemed to be thinking about something important. His name was David Chun, but nobody in the restaurant knew who he was. He looked like any other businessman having dinner alone. David had been working for 16 hours straight at his company. He was tired and needed a quiet place to eat and think. Romano's was close to his office building, so he decided to try it. The food was good and the atmosphere was peaceful. He liked watching the other people enjoy their meals. Mr. Peterson, the piano player, had just finished his first set of the evening. He always took a break between sets to rest his fingers and have some coffee. The beautiful black piano sat empty in the middle of the room. The keys seemed to shine under the restaurant lights. David noticed the little boy in the wheelchair looking at the piano. The boy had been staring at it all through dinner. David could see something special in the child's eyes. It was not just curiosity, it looked like longing. Like the boy was seeing something that other people could not see. Tommy put down his crayon and wheeled his chair a little closer to the piano. He looked around to make sure his mom was not watching. Maria was busy taking an order from a big table of people. Tommy pushed his wheelchair as close to the piano as he could get. The piano bench was too high for Tommy to reach from his wheelchair. But he could see the keys perfectly. They were white and black and beautiful. Tommy imagined what it would sound like if he could touch them. He had listened to Mr. Peterson play so many times. In his head, Tommy could hear the music. Maria finished taking the order and looked around for Tommy. She saw him by the piano and felt worried. What if he got in trouble for being too close? What if Mr. Romano got angry? What if the fancy customers complained? Maria started walking toward Tommy, but then something happened that made her stop. Tommy looked up at his mother with the biggest smile she had ever seen. His eyes were bright and full of hope. He whispered something to her that made Maria's heart skip a beat. Tommy asked if he could touch the piano keys just once, just to see what they felt like, just to know what it was like to make music. Maria looked around the restaurant. All the customers seemed busy with their food and conversation. Mr. Romano was in the kitchen. Mr. Peterson was having coffee in the back room. Maybe nobody would notice if Tommy just touched the keys for 1 second, but then Maria thought about her job. She needed this job to pay for their apartment and food and Tommy's doctor visits. If she got fired, they would have nothing. They might have to move back in with her mother in Texas. Tommy would have to change schools and doctors. Maria could not let that happen. She started to tell Tommy no, but then she saw his face. He looked so hopeful and innocent. Tommy never asked for anything. He never complained when other kids had toys he could not have. He never cried when they had to eat rice and beans for dinner again because there was no money for anything else. David Chun watched this whole scene from his table. He could not hear what the mother and son were saying, but he could see the love between them. He could see that the boy wanted something very much, and the mother was trying to decide if she could give it to him. Something about the way the boy looked at the piano made David remember himself as a child. David had grown up poor, too. His parents worked in a laundry and could barely pay rent. But David had dreams of building computers and starting his own company. His parents thought his dreams were too big, but they never told him to stop dreaming. Maria made a decision that surprised even herself. She looked around the restaurant one more time. Then she bent down and very carefully lifted Tommy out of his wheelchair. Tommy was small for his age and did not weigh very much. Maria placed him gently on the piano bench. Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. His small hands reached out toward the keys, but he did not touch them yet. He just looked at them up close for the first time. The keys were smooth and perfect. Tommy could see his reflection in the shiny black wood of the piano. Maria stood right behind Tommy, ready to lift him back into his wheelchair if anyone complained. Her heart was beating fast and her hands were shaking a little. She had never done anything this risky at work before. But seeing Tommy so happy made it feel worth it. David put down his fork and watched more carefully. Other people in the restaurant were starting to notice the little boy at the piano, too. Some of them smiled, thinking it was cute. Others looked confused about why a child was at the piano during dinner service. Tommy took a deep breath and very gently placed his fingers on the white keys. He did not press them down yet. He just felt how smooth and cool they were. His eyes closed and he smiled the biggest smile. For this one moment, Tommy felt like all his dreams could come true. Maria watched her son and felt tears starting in her eyes. She had given him this one small moment of happiness. She did not know what would happen next, but right now, Tommy was touching his dream, and that was enough. Tommy sat on the piano bench with his small fingers resting on the white keys. He could feel the smooth surface under his fingertips. The keys were cool and perfect. Tommy had dreamed about this moment so many times. Now it was real, and he could hardly believe it. Maria stood behind her son, watching every face in the restaurant. She was ready to grab Tommy and put him back in his wheelchair if anyone looked angry. Her job was too important to lose. But for now, everyone seemed busy with their own dinners. The candles flickered and people talked quietly at their tables. Tommy pressed down on one white key very softly. The sound was clear and beautiful. It rang through the air like a small bell. Tommy smiled and pressed another key, then another. Each note sounded perfect to him. He had heard Mr. Peterson play these same keys hundreds of times, but making the sounds himself felt like magic. David Chun stopped eating his dinner completely. He was watching the little boy with great interest. David had studied piano when he was young. His parents saved money for 2 years to buy him an old piano from a neighbor. David knew good musical instincts when he saw them. This boy had something special. At first, Tommy played single notes one at a time. He listened carefully to each sound before moving to the next key. His face was serious and focused, like he was learning something very important. The notes floated through the restaurant, mixing with the quiet conversations and clinking of glasses. Then something amazing happened. Tommy began playing a simple melody. It was a song everyone knew, but Tommy played it in his own way. His left hand found the lower keys, while his right hand played the main tune. The music flowed from his fingers like water. It was soft and gentle, and absolutely beautiful. Maria gasped and put her hand over her mouth. She had no idea Tommy could do this. When had he learned to play music like this? She watched his small hands move across the keys with confidence. It looked like he had been playing piano his whole life. But Tommy had never touched a piano before tonight. More people in the restaurant started to notice. Conversations became quieter as people turned to listen to the music. The melody Tommy played was familiar, but he added his own touches that made it sound new and special. His timing was perfect and every note was clear and true. David put down his wine glass and leaned forward in his chair. What he was hearing was impossible. This child was playing with the skill of someone who had studied music for years. But David could tell this was raw, natural talent. The boy was not playing from memory or from lessons. He was playing from his heart. Tommy finished the first song and without stopping moved into another melody. This one was more complex with both hands working together in harmony. The music filled every corner of the restaurant. People stopped talking completely now. Forks stopped moving halfway to mouths. Everyone was listening to the 6-year-old boy who was creating magic at the piano. The second song Tommy played was one that Mr. Peterson performed every Friday night. It was a classical piece with difficult passages and complicated timing. Tommy played it perfectly. His small fingers reached across the keys, finding exactly the right notes at exactly the right moments. The music soared and danced and sang. Maria felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She was proud and amazed and scared all at the same time. Her little boy was playing music like an angel, but she was also terrified that someone would make him stop. She looked around the restaurant expecting to see angry faces. Instead, she saw people sitting perfectly still with wonder in their eyes. David Chun felt goosebumps on his arms as he listened. He had heard professional pianists who could not play with this much feeling. This child was not just playing notes. He was telling a story with the music. Each phrase had meaning and emotion. It was the most beautiful thing David had heard in years. A woman at table 4 had tears in her eyes. She whispered to her husband that she had never heard anything so lovely. An older man near the window put down his newspaper and closed his eyes to listen better. The whole restaurant had become like a concert hall with everyone focused on Tommy. And his music, Tommy played for almost 10 minutes without stopping. He moved from one song to another like he had a whole concert planned in his head. Each piece was different, but they all flowed together perfectly. His face showed pure joy as his fingers danced across the keys. This was what he was meant to do. The final song Tommy played was the most beautiful of all. It started soft and gentle like a lullaby. Then it grew stronger and more complex. His left hand played a steady rhythm while his right hand soared with the melody. The music seemed to tell the story of dreams and hope and love that never gives up. When Tommy played the last note, the restaurant was completely silent. The sound hung in the air for a moment like magic that nobody wanted to break. Tommy lifted his hands from the keys and looked around with surprise. He had been so focused on the music that he forgot about all the people watching him. Then something wonderful happened. One person started clapping, then another. Then everyone in the restaurant was applauding loudly. People stood up from their tables to clap better. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. The whole room filled with the sound of appreciation. Tommy looked confused by all the attention. He turned to look at his mother with questions in his eyes. Maria was crying and smiling at the same time. She had never been so proud of anything in her whole life. Her little boy had just shown everyone in this fancy restaurant that he was special. He was talented and gifted and amazing. David Chun stood up and clapped louder than anyone else. He knew he had just witnessed something rare and precious. This was not just a cute child playing piano. This was a genuine musical prodigy. A boy who had learned to play by listening and watching and feeling the music in his soul. The applause continued. For a long time, Tommy smiled shyly and waved at the people who were clapping for him. He did not understand why they were so excited, but he felt happy that his music had made them smile. Maria gently lifted him back into his wheelchair as the applause finally began to fade. But the magic of what had just happened would stay with everyone in that restaurant for the rest of their lives. The applause slowly died down and people in the restaurant began talking excitedly about what they had just heard. Tommy sat in his wheelchair looking happy, but a little confused by all the attention. He had just played music because it felt good. He did not understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. Maria quickly wiped the tears from her eyes and tried to look normal again. She was worried that her boss, Mr. Romano, would be angry about what had happened. She had let Tommy play the piano during dinner service without asking permission. That was probably against the rules. Maria needed this job too much to lose it over one moment of letting Tommy follow his dreams. David Chun stood up from his table and walked slowly toward Maria and Tommy. Other customers were still talking about the amazing music they had just heard. Some were taking pictures with their phones to share with friends. The atmosphere in the restaurant felt electric, like something magical had just happened. When David reached Maria and Tommy, he smiled warmly at both of them. Maria expected him to complain about the noise or the disruption to his dinner. Instead, David knelt down so he was at eye level with Tommy. He told Tommy that his playing was the most beautiful music he had heard in a very long time. Tommy smiled shyly and thanked the nice man. He asked David if he really liked the music. David nodded and said it was absolutely wonderful. He asked Tommy where he had learned to play piano so well. Tommy looked at his mother and then back at David. He said he had never had lessons, but he loved listening to Mr. Peterson play every weekend. David felt amazed by this answer. He had suspected that Tommy was self-taught, but hearing it confirmed was incredible. This boy had learned complex classical pieces just by listening and watching. That kind of musical ability was extremely rare. David knew talent when he saw it, and Tommy had more natural ability than most professional musicians. Maria introduced herself and Tommy to David. She apologized for any trouble the piano playing might have caused. She explained that Tommy had always been fascinated by music, but they could not afford lessons. She promised it would not happen again if David was upset about it. David quickly assured Maria that he was not upset at all. He said Tommy's playing had made his entire evening better. Then David asked if he could speak with Maria privately for a few minutes. Maria felt nervous but agreed. She asked Tommy to stay right there and not move from his wheelchair. David and Maria walked to a quiet corner of the restaurant where they could talk without being overheard. David told Maria that he worked with talented young people and their families. He said he knew people who gave scholarships to children with special gifts. He asked if Maria would be interested in getting Tommy some real piano lessons. Maria felt her heart start beating faster. Piano lessons sounded wonderful, but she knew they were expensive. She told David honestly that she could not afford to pay for lessons. She worked as hard as she could, but there was never extra money for things like music education. She thanked David for the kind offer but said it was impossible. David smiled and explained that he was talking about free lessons. He said there were programs that helped gifted children get the education they deserved, regardless of their family's financial situation. He told Maria that Tommy had the kind of talent that deserved to be developed and nurtured. At first, Maria could not believe what she was hearing. Free piano lessons for Tommy sounded too good to be true. She had learned to be careful of people who promised things that seemed impossible. Maria asked David why he would want to help a family he had just met. She wondered what he wanted in return. David understood Maria's suspicion. He explained that he had grown up in a family without much money too. He said he remembered what it felt like to have dreams that seemed out of reach because of finances. He told Maria that helping talented young people was something he cared deeply about. While they were talking, Mr. Romano appeared looking worried. He had heard from other staff that there had been some kind of scene with the piano during dinner service. He was concerned that customers might have been disturbed or that the restaurant's reputation might have been damaged somehow. David quickly stepped forward and introduced himself to Mr. Romano. He praised the restaurant's food and atmosphere. Then he told Mr. Romano that Tommy's piano playing had been the highlight of his entire week. He said it was the kind of special moment that would make him want to come back to Romano's again and again. Mr. Romano looked relieved to hear that David was happy rather than angry. Other customers were also telling him how much they had enjoyed the surprise musical performance. Some were asking if the boy would play again on future visits. Mr. Romano began to see that maybe this incident had been good for business rather than bad. David asked Maria if he could arrange a meeting with the scholarship program coordinator. He said someone could meet with her and Tommy within the next few days to discuss the possibilities. Maria felt overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger, but also hopeful for the first time in months. Maria agreed to the meeting but asked David not to get Tommy's hopes up too high. She explained that Tommy had already faced disappointment in his young life and she did not want him to be hurt if things did not work out. David promised to be careful about what he said to Tommy. David walked back over to Tommy, who was still sitting quietly in his wheelchair. He told Tommy that he had enjoyed meeting him and hearing his music. He said that sometimes talented people get opportunities to learn more about their gifts. He asked Tommy if he would like to meet someone who could teach him more about playing piano. Tommy's eyes got very wide and bright. He asked if David meant real piano lessons like the kids in movies got. David nodded and said yes, that was exactly what he meant. Tommy looked at his mother with excitement and hope written all over his face. Maria smiled and told Tommy they would see what could be arranged. David wrote his phone number on a piece of paper and gave it to Maria. He told her someone would call her tomorrow to set up the meeting. He thanked both Maria and Tommy for making his evening so special. Then he returned to his table to finish his dinner. Maria felt like she was dreaming as she helped Tommy gather his homework and coloring books. Could this really be happening, or was it too good to be true? Maria could not sleep all night after meeting David at the restaurant. She kept thinking about his promise to help Tommy get piano lessons. It seemed too wonderful to be real. Maria had learned that when something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. But there had been something different about David. He seemed honest and kind. The next morning, Maria got a phone call from a woman named Sarah who said she worked with the scholarship program David had mentioned. Sarah asked if Maria and Tommy could come for a meeting that afternoon. She gave Maria an address in the business part of the city. Maria wrote it down carefully and promised they would be there. Maria spent the whole day feeling nervous and excited. She helped Tommy pick out his best clothes for the meeting. Tommy wore his blue shirt that made his eyes look bright and his black pants that Maria had bought for special occasions. Maria put on her nicest dress and tried to make herself look professional. They took 2 buses to get to the address Sarah had given them. Maria expected to arrive at a music school or maybe a small office building. Instead, the bus stopped in front of the biggest office building Maria had ever seen. The sign on the building said Chun Technologies. Maria checked the address 3 times to make sure they were in the right place. The lobby of the building was huge with marble floors and glass walls that reached up to the ceiling. There were expensive paintings on the walls and flowers everywhere. Maria felt very small and out of place in such a fancy building. Tommy looked around with wide eyes, taking in all the impressive sights. A security guard at the front desk asked Maria who they were there to see. Maria gave him David's name and showed him the paper with the address. The guard made a phone call and then smiled. He told Maria and Tommy to take the elevator to the 25th floor. Someone would meet them there. As the elevator went up and up, Maria began to feel more confused. Why would a scholarship meeting be happening in such an expensive office building? Who was David really, and why had he wanted to help them? Maria started to worry that maybe this was some kind of mistake or misunderstanding when the elevator doors opened. David was standing there waiting for them. He smiled and welcomed Maria and Tommy warmly. He looked different than he had at the restaurant. Instead of casual clothes, he was wearing an expensive business suit. He looked important and successful. Maria felt even more confused about what was happening. David led them down a hallway lined with windows that showed the whole city spread out below. Tommy pressed his face to the glass, amazed by how high up they were. They could see cars that looked like tiny toys and people walking around like ants. Maria had never been so high up in a building before. They entered a conference room with a long table and comfortable chairs. On the walls were pictures of David shaking hands with famous people Maria recognized from television. There were also awards and certificates with David's name on them. Maria began to realize that David was much more important than she had thought. David asked Maria and Tommy to sit down and offered them drinks and snacks. Then he began to explain who he really was. He told them that he was the owner of Shen Technologies, which was one of the biggest computer companies in the world. He said he had started the company 15 years ago, and now it employed thousands of people. Maria felt shocked and overwhelmed. She had served dinner to one of the richest men in the country and had no idea who he was. She thought about how she had worried about Tommy disturbing David's meal. Now she discovered that David owned buildings and companies and probably had more money than Maria could imagine. David saw the surprise on Maria's face and quickly tried to make her feel comfortable. He explained that he did not like people to treat him differently because of his money. He said he preferred to eat dinner in peace like any normal person. That was why he had not told them who he was at the restaurant. Then David began to explain what he wanted to do for Tommy. He said he had not been completely honest about the scholarship program. The truth was that David was going to create a new program just for Tommy. He wanted to pay for the best piano teachers in the city to work with Tommy. He also wanted to buy Tommy his own piano to practice on at home. Maria felt like she might faint from shock. David was offering to give Tommy everything she had ever dreamed of for her son, but it was so much more than she had expected. She asked David why he would do such expensive things for a family he barely knew. She wondered what he expected from them in return. David explained that when he was Tommy's age, his family was very poor too. His parents worked in a laundry and could barely pay for food and rent. David had dreams of working with computers, but his family could not afford to buy him the books and classes he needed. A kind teacher at his school helped David get a scholarship to college. Without that help, David never could have started his company. David told Maria that helping Tommy was his way of giving back to the world. He said Tommy had a gift that was extremely rare and special. It would be wrong to let that gift go to waste. Because of money problems, David had enough money to help 1,000 families like Maria and Tommy, and it would not change his life at all. But David had even more surprises for Maria. He offered her a job working for his company helping other families find educational opportunities for their gifted children. The job paid 3 times more than Maria made at the restaurant. It would allow her to focus on helping Tommy develop his musical abilities while also helping other families facing similar challenges. Maria started crying because she could not believe how much her life was about to change. Tommy asked his mother why she was sad. Maria explained that these were happy tears because their dreams were finally coming true. Tommy smiled and asked if this meant he could really learn to play piano like Mr. Peterson. David promised Tommy that he would learn to play even better than Mr. Peterson. He said Tommy would have the best teachers and the best piano and all the time he needed to practice. He told Tommy that someday people all over the world would come to hear him play music. 6 months later, Tommy gave his first real concert at a music hall downtown. David and Maria sat in the front row watching Tommy play the same songs he had played that night at Romano's restaurant. But now Tommy played with confidence and skill that came from months of lessons with the best teachers money could buy. The audience gave Tommy a standing ovation just like the people at Romano's had done. But this time Tommy understood what it meant. He was sharing his gift with the world and making people happy with his music. Maria looked at David and whispered, "Thank you for believing in her son when no one else did." David smiled and said that sometimes the most amazing things happen when we pay attention to the magic that is right in front of us. Tommy's music had changed David's life too by reminding him why helping others was the most important thing anyone could do with their success.